The Chisa hype train is starting to wobble, and players are asking the one question that decides everything. Is she really a must-have? For months, Chisa has been the talk of the community, her leaks promising powerful Havoc-Bane synergy, high-scaling damage, and incredible aesthetics that made players skip both Galbraina and Shu Yi Wan just to save for her. But recently, the rumor mill has shifted, and what once sounded like the arrival of a top-tier DPS now looks like a support-healer hybrid that could completely change how Aero and Spectro compositions function. Yo, welcome back to the channel. Kamusta sa inyong lahat? My apologies for the AI voice once again. There is illness in the family, and I need to be quiet to let them rest, but my real voice will be back in the next video, hopefully. Now, if you need to top up in order to get Lunites, Asterites, and Battle Pass exclusives for Shu Yi Wan or Chisa, use my loot bar link down in the description for up to 25% in savings. Not only are you helping your finances, you'll also help mine as well. Loot Bar is the most trusted name when it comes to Wuwa top-ups with amazing Trustpilot reviews. With their mobile DIY top-ups, you will get the discounts without giving out your password. So use my link for an extra 10% off your first purchase now. And thank you, Loot Bar, for sponsoring this video. According to the latest whispers from the Lords of Forbidden Knowledge, Chisa will be a healing support build to interact with damage over time effects like Aero, Erosion, and Spectro Frazzle. That alone gives her an identity that stands out. She won't just heal. She'll enhance or maintain these dot setups in a way that could smooth out some of the most awkward team rotations in the game. On paper, this sounds valuable, but when you place that beside the original expectation of a high-burst DPS, it's understandable why some fans feel blindsided. Let's address the elephant in the room. Apparently, her DPS potential is heavily gated behind her 6th sequence, meaning, unless you're ready to wail, you won't get access to her full power. For the average player, at 0 sequences, she's expected to function primarily as a support buffer and healer, with some decent damage and Havoc-related effects. This creates a huge divide between casual players and those who invest heavily into constellations, or in this case, sequences. High spenders could end up experiencing a completely different version of Chisa, one capable of sustained high-output DPS bursts and longer Havoc uptime, while free-to-play or low spenders would only see a fraction of that potential. That revelation alone has caused a wave of doubt among players who were initially ready to crown her the next big thing, as it raises the question of whether her design philosophy leans too heavily toward incentivizing spending rather than ensuring balance and accessibility across all players. It's also important to consider the current state of the meta. Right now, most players judge the value of a Resonator based on how much damage they can deal, not their ability to sustain or buff. Utility-based roles often end up being undervalued, especially when raw numbers dominate the community's attention. So when the leaks started shifting the narrative from Chisa the Destroyer to Chisa the Healer, it's not surprising that some fans jumped off the bandwagon. The disappointment is real. Chisa was supposed to be the character who broke the mold, not fit into a niche category. But before we declare her a skip, let's take a step back and analyze what she potentially offers in more detail. The biggest highlight is her rumored ability to heal within both Aero Erosion and Spectro Frazzle teams, and that's no small feat. This kind of dual-element adaptability could finally bring consistency to two elemental archetypes that have struggled to find reliable, fast-paced healers since launch. Aero, Rover, and Shorekeeper have been filling those roles, but not without flaws. Rover's erosion stacking, for instance, feels sluggish and time-consuming, especially when rotations depend on maintaining uptime for other units. Shorekeeper, on the other hand, can sustain, but lacks fluid synergy with offensive rotations, forcing players into awkward timing and wasted seconds. If Chisa can speed that up while keeping the team healthy, she could redefine what an optimal Aero Erosion setup looks like. It would mean smoother transitions, less time wasted between skill cooldowns, and possibly a new standard for hybrid team rotations that don't require sacrificing healing for momentum. This could push Aero teams into a new era of speed and sustain that rivals Spectro's current dominance. Then there's the Spectro Frazzle angle. Sunny's entire kit revolves around consuming Frazzle stacks provided by teammates. The problem is, those stacks don't generate as efficiently as players would like. If Chisa can introduce a mechanic that not only applies more stacks, but also supports energy regeneration for characters like Phoebe, that's a major quality of life boost. It would make Frazzle teams smoother, faster, and more competitive in damage output compared to current compositions. There's also an interesting theory circulating about how her kit might work. Some speculate her Forte circuit could offer 3 debuff options depending on how many times you cast it. One cast could apply Frazzle, a second might apply Erosion, and a third could introduce a Havoc Bane effect. If that turns out to be true, it would give players strategic control over which reaction to prioritize during combat, a level of flexibility we haven't seen before in Wuthering Waves. It would also explain how she manages to support multiple elements at once without breaking balance. Now, let's entertain the possibility of her being a hybrid DPS. If, by some miracle, her base multipliers are strong enough to make her viable at 0 sequence, then we might be looking at a unit who can do it all: heal, support, and still hit decently hard. Pair her with Rover and Chi, and you could have a sustainable, high uptime team that doesn't even need a dedicated healer. That kind of self-sufficiency would instantly raise her stock. However, if her damage remains mediocre without high sequence investment, then her main appeal will rest on how effectively she makes Aero and Spectro compositions less clunky. Her true potential would lie in the subtle yet impactful ways she reduces downtime and amplifies the consistency of your rotations. She could serve as the glue that holds certain team archetypes together, improving energy cycles, creating smoother transitions between bursts, and letting your main DPS units shine with greater frequency. In games like Wuthering Waves, there's enormous hidden value in a character who can stabilize a team's pacing, who makes rotations feel effortless instead of chaotic. And that's not a bad role to have at all. Sometimes the best characters aren't the ones with the biggest numbers, but the ones who make everyone else's numbers easier to reach, turning an average setup into a finely tuned symphony of damage and support efficiency. Still, we can't ignore the uncertainty. Until the beta gives us a full look at her kit, everything remains speculative. Maybe she turns out to be an underwhelming hybrid, or maybe she's the missing puzzle piece that elevates multiple teams at once. The key is to manage expectations. Hype can cloud judgment, and just because Chisa's role might not match her original hype doesn't mean she lacks value. A well-designed support healer character can outlive pure DPS characters in long-term metas simply because of their flexibility. So, is Chisa a must-pull? For now, it depends on your roster and how much you value smooth team synergy over raw numbers. If you love playing Aero, Erosion, or Spectro Frazzle teams, she could be your dream unit. If you're only chasing damage ceilings, she might feel like a letdown. But one thing's for sure, once the beta footage drops and we see her in action, the narrative could change yet again. For all we know, she might surprise everyone and reclaim her title as the queen of hybrid versatility. What do you think? Is Chisa still the meta-defining unit we hoped for, or has she become a cautionary tale about overhype? Only time and the next round of beta tests will tell. If this video resonated with you, please leave a like for Shu Yu Yan Gotcha Luck, subscribe to get Chisa, and hit the bell for Geishu Lin Blessing. Thank you so much for watching, maraming salamat po, and I will see you in the next video drop. Goodbye.